welcome back to the Identity Human podcast with Don and
Ray.
Ray's back. So I think
I haven't been here for a while.
No, I know. We've been busy. Do you want to move a bit closer?
Okay, sure.
Here we go. Now we're a bit more cozy. So thanks very much for tuning in. And as you can see, we have a third person. We've been super fortunate with guests lately. And we've got Rachel Frances Thomson from, would you call it iMove? So biomechanics education is how I first got introduced, and I'll give my story first, but I would say, Rachel, welcome, and thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm very flattered. It's great to meet Ray as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's nice to have you all in one room, because I was asked to go up, and it was through the brand, the business that you're connected with, and I was asked to go up, or you asked me to come up and do a talk, and I was kind of like the guinea pig for these. It's like the biomechanics education, and it was, I didn't realize it was very similar to what I had at Exeter Chiefs at the top level, the way that they assess, but they never explained all the stuff that they were doing. So when I was at rugby, it was just come through this machine, click, 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 okay, you're good. And then I got to see the other side of it, where Rachel was like, this is why we do this. This is what we're testing when we can see this. And it was so interesting. But I always feel like there's two things that have an effect on how you come across to people. And that's one, it's the knowledge and the way you can connect the dots and understand how everything ties in. So you're not just pointing out the thing you're showing, you're pointing out how it connects to something in the future and in the past. But you're also doing that with love and energy and sensitivity. And Rachel, I picked up that in terms of your character, your passion, and your love. And that lasted. So when Rachel messaged tonight before saying, hey guys, what's the link? I was like, here's the link. Sorry for the lateness. Look forward to your energy. And bang, it was right there. It was a good reminder. So yeah, do you want to give a quick 1 minute pitch as to like who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Yeah, 1 minute pitch. So, I was a cripplingly shy child who found confidence in my passion, which was for human form and movement, and gained all sorts of qualifications along the way in British weightlifting, biomechanics coaching, obviously, sports therapist, strength and conditioning, yoga. But ultimately, just always had this interest in the physical form. I worked it out, actually, when I knew I was going to speak to you. It's been 40 years that I've always had a gym membership. So from the age of sort of 15 with my parents, my dad was athletics and rugby. He's Wigan Warriors. And then my mum in contemporary dance. So I was quite heavily influenced into movement, but I'd never seen it as a career. It just sort of happened as a passion. And certainly my mum, when I was younger, I was going to say, I was so shy. I remember she put me into these dance classes, and that's where I blossomed, I guess.
Wow. So, interesting mix of rugby, athletics, and then the dance classes. So it's almost the two extremes that people they're only like 5-10 years ago. Was it Eddie Jones was like, I'll send my rugby players to do ballet, and they struggled for like in the first 10 minutes. And I suppose it gets you to see the two extremes of the beauty, the alignment with the dancing, and then the muscular form and everything with the rugby and athletics. And I often talk about experiencing that. So Ray, do you want to start off with any questions or your thoughts from your side of things? Because Ray and I are kind of opposite in the way we think and the questions we ask, and she often asks some very good questions. So I'm putting you on the spot here too.
Putting me on the spot. Yeah, so that event, because I actually came up to that event, if you forget, I came up along with you as a +1. And that's why I say I've met Rachel before.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Actually. I remember there was a spa at the hotel. Yes.
I remember I went through in the morning and you just had a great day.
Yes, and then I came through and watched your talk, yes. Yeah. And what really struck me in that room was that you were bringing together, Rachel, a room full of experts, and trying to inspire, sure, you had more experts talking at them and sharing more technical knowledge around how to be a better physio or help people move better, etc. But you also brought people like Don in to inspire them. So I would love to hear more about your vision with what you're trying to achieve in that industry, in that space.
Nice.
Yeah, a great question. And I think this is where my kind of two... when you get a business and you have the idea of core values, and I have two core values, which is integrity and empowerment, that run through every decision I make. And it was born from my childhood, which was wonderful. My parents were fantastic. I obviously went through my painfully shy era. But in terms of schooling, I was a non-academic. And back then, everything, maybe still a little bit now, the focus was very much academia, maths, English. And so I didn't really do very well at school. I left with pretty much nothing. At 16, I tried a little bit of college. But that really poor experience was sort of influenced me in terms of where I've ended up. And over time, having mentors who influenced me heavily and believed in me before I did, to be honest, inspired me to look at ways that I could pass on that gift to people who had been like me or were still feeling like me. And so I class myself as a non-academic, even though I'm a teacher of biomechanics education to physios, personal trainers, because of my learning style, which is certainly not sitting, reading, going to lectures. I've never been to university, I've never done a degree. However, I've managed somehow to find a way to learn, understand, and then use that in the classroom to show other non-academics you are intelligent. Your intelligent style and the way you learn may just not be what is traditionally seen as academic. And so that, I think, that's where I feel passionate. I get emotional when I think about how worthless I felt. It really influenced a lot of my childhood, my self-value. And so to have these people, these other mentors, they didn't know, by the way, at the time they were mentoring me, but people who inspired me, had me stand in front of people, presenting, talking, made me realize, actually, I've got this. I've actually got something here. And so I think that's really what's driven that sort of integrity of being honest and open. I'm a non-academic. I'm not very bright. I'm not very quick. I've got an attention span about that long. 7 seconds is it? Same as a fish. But the empowerment I felt when I was shown a way to learn and connect and follow a passion, that drives everything I do. So yeah, empowerment, integrity, definitely.
Fascinating answer. That thanks for being vulnerable there in terms of that struggle in school, not being an academic, and that's something that you still, like you said that like 4 times. It was so interesting, and I was like, well, define an academic. Like, you mentioned learning styles and mentors. They're so underrated in terms of how we view people, because we'll often judge others how we judge ourselves. So that you don't know what you don't know. So if I should be learning this way, how can you not get it? And that would be what you'll find in school, is like, well, if you can't do maths, you're not an academic. But by getting the right people to recognize the best things within you, you are able now to give the gift that you've got, which is that really hands-on learning style. And you could tell, I reckon you could go up against some top biomechanical professors and give them deeper insight that they've never seen, because your learning style has been on people. It's that experience that's so important. And it's like how we act is better, it speaks louder than how we say. And that's why when you've got a room full of people, you can go, I don't have a degree. And everyone's like, what? She doesn't have a degree. But watch me work. And then they watch you work, and just your energy and your authenticity inspires people. And I often speak about that in terms of leadership. So, especially in the business world, it's quite tiring listening to everyone define what a leader is. And I'm like, well, if you asked Rachel, would she ever put leader in her title? Probably not. But you epitomize what it is. It's, you stand in front of people, you inspire them by being authentic, by giving the right energy, and you allow people to get the best out of themselves. And they think it's all them, but realistically, it's because they're feeding off your energy at the same time. So I probably want to tap into that mentor bit that you mentioned, and like take you a bit deeper into it. It's like, are there any like core memories or sayings or just things that they did that they probably didn't even realize they're doing, or they did on purpose, that really stuck with you, that enabled you to, if not just them seeing the best in you, but like, how did they constantly get you to realize that you went from shy, anxious, non-academic, where am I going in life, to this like, this is my gift and I'm going to give it to the world. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, there have been pivotal moments, and I think one was when I was at my most fragile, in my late teens, early 20s, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't feel very confident about myself, and I landed a 3-month contract in Greece as a cabaret dancer because a girl had broken a leg, and a friend of mine thought, oh, Rachel, come out, gave me a ring, said, do you want to come out and do some dancing with us for 3 months? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I went over there for 3 months, and it actually turned into a 6-year dancing career. I became a professional dancer. And obviously that was a huge change. But I met my first mentor, and I went to see him for the first time in 30 years last month. So Dimitri Omoridis was my dance agent in Greece back in 1991. And he was 80 this year. And he still looks like he's got the body of a 30-year-old bodybuilder. This guy is phenomenal. He's very short. He's extremely muscular. He took up at 78 decathlon. But back then, when I was 21 and I'd come from, a troubled teen, I was dabbling in things that I shouldn't have, made the decision to go abroad. He was there, and he just had this presence and spoke to me in a way that made me feel important. I was using the gym because I'd been doing that for several years anyway. So he was probably my first influence, and he would describe about the human form, and bodybuilding was very popular back then, in the male sector more so than the female sector. But talking about the form, and I kind of understood that, and obviously we were dancing, so it was all very physical. So he was my first influence, and then the joy of going to see him this year was just a real pleasure. But I think then in terms of the business I'm now involved in and sort of what I do in education, I'd have to say Martin Haynes, who was the chartered physio, he was a member at my gym back in 2006, where I was a gym instructor and I was helping to manage the gym. And he approached me and said, I've done some research. It was quite interesting. Would you like to get involved in creating some education from it? Me being me, said, yeah, sure. I wasn't quite sure why he was asking me, but I thought, yeah, I'll get involved. This sounds interesting. Yeah. So he, myself, and a couple of sports therapists started to work together to create the education, which has now become Barbican Education several decades later. But he would ask me questions about things. I honestly didn't really know what they were talking about. I was totally out of my depth, but I was so flattered I'd been invited. I kind of felt obliged to commit and really think about what he was asking me and give an opinion, because he was showing a value in my opinion. So then I presented my opinion, and he said, that's interesting, and he took it. Now, whether he actually thought it was interesting or whether, I don't know. But it inspired me. This guy believes in me, and he was encouraging me to present some of the education, and we were doing that to sports coaches with Kelly Holmes Bootcamp back in Bath University some years ago. I was doing that with physiotherapists, podiatrists. And afterwards, to me, I was just doing this thing for him, for Martin. He was, believed in me. So I felt, I needed to show him I was committed. And after teaching, he'd sit there and he'd say, do you know what you've just done? And he had this pride in me, like a fatherly pride. So I think that definitely was a huge pivot for me back in mid-2000s.
Yeah.
Which is a great example of, if we think about like our podcast and our focus, like how do we like maximize human potential, get the most out of people? It's a really great example of someone just believing in the best in you and like really seeing the best in you, which then empowered you and actually kind of drove you to find that best in yourself and put your best foot forward, because you were like, wow, this person really believes in me. And so it's a great lesson. It's something that I know I need to work on, because I tend to always more lean on the criticism side of things. But it's great to hear a story like that and what a difference it made in your life.
Well, and I also just picking up on that is the finer detail of a lot of times people will go, let's start a business together. And if they know, they'll go, do this, do this, do this, do this. I mean, it sounded like he was like, what do you think? And allowed you that space to come into it. And he was like, cool, thanks for contributing. And you were just like, wait, what? There was no right or wrong. It was just me. And I think a lot of people have that. I think imposter syndrome, there's lots of ways of looking at it. Like, is you need it to see the bigger picture and to be driven. But it can also be something that gets in your way. Whereas he almost gave you permission to just be like, what do you think? And nothing that you could do would hold you back from being able to say that, because he was like, come on, you tell me. I think it's so important this day and age is we always try too hard when we're mentoring others, instead of just going, I'll give you the space, you come into it. And that's planted that seed within you that allowed you to just go with it. I think it's a great story. So we often try and like make sure that listeners are taking the lessons that are important. And you're either being mentored by someone and lean into them, or you're mentoring someone and learn from that. Like Rachel's just told you how she's gone from being unconfident in what she knows in terms of comparing to others, which we all do, to then just one little spark helping her realize what she can bring and that she is appreciated. So, Ray said at the beginning, it's like just someone believing in you is important. So how are we believing in others around us? And the next tangent I want to go into this is, obviously you own your own business now, and there's the classic thing of the triangle of technician, entrepreneur, manager in a business. You need those three triangles to run it well. If you've got a team, you make sure that those three elements are covered by someone else. But if you own the business, you are the technician, you are the manager, and you are the entrepreneur. And often the technician is just like, I want to do the stuff that makes me passionate. And before we started recording, we were talking about like how you sell it, how you get people to buy your stuff, because that's not where you want to be. You want to be like teaching, you want to be imparting, you want to be hands-on, but you can't get those people in without going, hey guys, this is what I do. Come and
being salesy.
And being salesy, which some people comes naturally. But how's that journey been for you? And have you seen a progression in yourself where you've realized that, how would you help someone that's at the beginning of a journey that you've been on? And what would you say to them?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. And I think in reference to running a business, one of the best lessons I had was failing miserably in business and trying to do all of those roles when I am the technician rather than the manager, the accountant, the bookkeeper, the salesperson. So a steep learning curve was and in it, the byproduct of that was actually to realize I was spending money. I was earning quite a bit at the time. I was spending the money I had. I had a lot of credit because I had a good income. So when everything fell apart, actually it grounded me back down to, I could have gone in one of two directions. Oh, this is awful, I'm going to get out. I failed miserably. But actually I thought, this is great insight. I can actually live off £800 a month with a mortgage on my own, feed myself, not have a job, and still, be involved in my passion and have people come to me and say, I want to do your education, which then drove me forwards. So I think in business, and I've still got 3 companies now. I've had 8, a couple that didn't work. One that obviously I lost everything. I did lose everything. But they put me in a better place. And so I think business is a very lonely world, really, really lonely when you set up on your own. So it is about being open and transparent about that. And I think you then naturally attract information, the whole, the secret of the law of attraction. You end up submerging yourself around areas where, so what is this about? I spent 2 years after failing miserably, immersed in business, grabbing everything that was free, Chris Cardell, Brian Tracy, Michael E. Gerber, all those big guys, and a few others in between, just immersing myself in business. And I actually got really excited by it, knowing that I had this really important purpose, that yes, I'd got it wrong before, but it wasn't the purpose that was wrong. It was just the way I was piecing it together. So when I started to find this way, And these solutions from the failures, I realized what I'd done wrong. Now I knew what I didn't want to do. Then I was able to form a business, which is obviously now extremely successful, selling education internationally. So
fantastic. Ray, I want to jump in on the finding out what you don't want to do, because I know that's a big thing of yours.
Or find out what you don't want to do in business.
So Rachel did it by failures, but you often say you'll talk someone through, like, I don't want to know what you do want to do, but it's your can't do list or shouldn't do list.
Oh, you're talking about the stop doing list.
The stop doing list, yeah. So
I'm trying to think of how you're linking that to her story.
Well, because Rachel said I've had 8 businesses, 5 of which didn't work, and I discovered what I didn't want to do. So this thing is,
but when Rachel said she discovered what she didn't want to do, wasn't she referring to what business type or what like actual business route she didn't want to go to, rather than the doing within the business?
Perhaps. I thought I'd just create the platform to bring that out here.
So when you said that you discovered what you didn't want to do, were you talking about what you didn't want to do within the business, like the roles, or do you mean you discovered what you didn't want to do in terms of the type of business you wanted to run?
Kind of a bit of all of that, really, but certainly the roles. I knew what I wasn't good at, but I recognised that. And so I think you referenced it earlier, Don, is the idea of delegating. So
yes.
Recognising the value. When you've got a business and you're worried about spending, but you recognise a job that's going to take me 6 hours, I'm going to hate it, it's not going to be done great. I can pay somebody, they can do it in half an hour, a much better job, and I can get on for another 5.5 hours growing the business,
exactly,
and bringing more income in. So
yeah. And as an accountant, I see so much of that. People think, okay, well, obviously accounting, once it gets too technical, people can't do like a limited company accounts unless they have experience. But when it comes to bookkeeping or the more like day-to-day accounting stuff, they like, oh, I can just do that. But what they don't realize is that firstly, it's going to take them 5 hours and it would take a bookkeeper an hour. Then they look at the £100 they would have to pay, and they don't realize if they pay that £100, they could go and actually, I don't know, go find a new client, come up with a new idea within that 5 hours. It would be worth way more than £100. So they don't value their own time. And like then another layer onto that is they look at they're like, oh, I'll just do it. That'll take 5 hours. But they don't realize that when they've been doing something wrong within that 5 hours for months and months down the line, it's then going to take a week to unpick and unwind what they've done. So it's like, if there are things like Don's referring to is, I always say, a stop doing list. As a business owner, everyone gets so obsessed with their to-do list, but what about your stop doing list? Like, as you go through your week or your day, you should be sitting down, and if you're doing something and you think to yourself, this is not fulfilling my energy, this is not what I'm meant to be doing, this is not like advancing the business, this is not like, you will know intuitively if it's something that you should be doing versus something that you can or should be getting a team member to do or outsourcing. And so it could be something as simple as you identify a couple of things that you can outsource and give to other people, but it also could be, once you've built that up over a few weeks or a couple of months, you then almost have a job description that you can then hire someone to do all that stuff for you if it's big enough. But it's like, people get so focused on the doing, but I think what Don really honed in there was like, I'm always like, well, what should you stop doing? And that's going to help you to really advance your business, I find.
Yeah. I was trying to tie in. I know that there's sorry, Rachel, were you going to say something?
I was just going to reference the Michael E. Gerber book, which is effectively a blueprint of that. So if anybody's not read that and you have a business, you need to read it. I've read it 5 times. And you start with the end goal and then work backwards with your strategic objectives, but write a job description for every job you do. And then when you find somebody, give them that job description. It's ready-made. So you're listing it out, how many hours a week you do within it. So he gives you that perfect blueprint of how to get rid of what you want to stop doing and pass on to someone else, to Ray's point.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So I suppose just my link in was, you failed to find out, you failed 5 times. So you found out what business to stop doing. And then you failed, within those failures, you found out what actions to stop doing. So sometimes you can do the right actions, but the wrong business. And that's, again, not going to feed us the right energy. And I think that's important when you're owning a business. You said it's lonely. And if it's lonely and you're getting your energy drained, you're not ending in a good space, even if it's making you money. So I suppose what I want to extract was, what are the actions you stop doing? And you need to find out what business you're doing that you should stop doing. Because often we want to try and explore those and think that we can do anything. So quick revert back to some key wording that you said, because no one said it yet. And I've noticed in the background you have 2 Buddhas, and you said, the secret and law of attraction. Could you just give us a bit of insight into that, and how has that helped you keeping faith, keeping courage?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not religious. I'm not sure I describe myself as spiritual, but I believe in the id, the ego, the self, the being within the self, the voices within, yourself. You talk to yourself. I'm mindful of that, and I reflect back. And just aside from that, I realized the other day I've written an 8 million word book, because I calculated. Wow. I've been writing my diary since I was 7 years old. I'm now 55, and I have every day since I was 7 years old written down. Wow. And I actually went up in the loft just a few weeks ago to look for the years that I was out dancing with Dimitri, just to see, just to remember some of that. And it was that sort of practice of reflection is habitual now. Every day I sit down with a diary, I write an A4 page of reflection. Some of it is diary, some of it what I did, some of it is journalistic and very reflective. Depends on my mood and where I'm at. And so my brain is just familiar with that reflection process. Why do I feel like that? What does that mean? How is that influencing me? Have I failed? Is it just failure when I give up? Surely I'm succeeding because I've taken the failure and I'm using it productively. So this goes on within me all the time. So I've kind of self-meditated in a variety of ways, maybe from the journaling. It's just been a habit. It's always been there. But more recently, studying more yoga practice because of that meditation side, and then discovering oxygen advantage and breath work, nasal breathing, and all that side all kind of links together. And it's areas that I hadn't studied before. I knew about them, but to actually start studying those in more depth over the last 3 or 4 years has really opened my eyes to the fact I am extremely meditative, maybe not what people think of as meditation. Yeah. And probably my best meditation is running. I have to move to think. So anybody watching this will see I'm really trying to stand as still as I can, but I'm standing up. So I'm extremely sort of dynamic. And so when I go out and run, it's like my calm, because I'm running, I'm in a rhythm, and I can then therefore think. So that's more my time that I meditate, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll dive on that point, because I often will say to someone, have you read a book? And I don't read books. And they go, I can't read. And I'm sorry. I mean, have you listened to a book? And they go, I struggle to focus. And I said, have you listened to a book while driving or running? Because that's the only, I figured out that I can't sit at my computer and listen to a book because I get too distracted. And I can't read a book because I'm always like, oh, my mind's working faster than this, and unless I'm really focused. And then I get time, I'm like, I need to finish this. But my easiest entries to thinking and listening are when I go for a run or when I'm driving, because it had something to do with, like, say,
or like
motor
doing
control.
household chores.
Yeah, or in the garden.
Yeah.
Even household chores, though, because there's kids and stuff running around. Ray can do it easier than I can. But I, like you said, I want to hone in on that point of, we often go, oh, there's a book that got recommended, but I don't like reading. So therefore, they just shut that off completely.
They only see one route to something.
Yeah, they only see one route. Yes. Whereas you've alluded to learning styles being moving and action. And that's how you've now, you've got a business without even needing the degree, because the depth of your learning has been so intrinsic and so hands-on that it's suited what you're about.
Or even the way Rachel meditates. It's not the typical way that someone would meditate. And it's just like great examples of like cliche thinking outside the box, but thinking that actually you might have thought that something's not for you or that you're not achieving something, but actually have you looked at it from a different angle? So it's really interesting.
We often tie in one-dimensional thinking is if Rachel says do journaling, we then try journaling and it doesn't work for us. But actually, journaling is meditation, and so is running is meditation. And if you can realize that it's just the ability to think and clear your mind, then there's 2 or 3 dimensional thinking, and you've gone, I'm going to apply what suits to me. And we often refer to that in personalities too. So certain personality types will tell you how to do something. And if you think and receive that information in a 1-dimensional format, you will try and do what suits them, and it doesn't work for you. So I really want to maybe like that we haven't had someone be as knowledgeable as to like open and like, this is my learning style, this works for me. And it's completely different to anyone else that we've had, where they will sit down and journal and that's their thing, or they will, they've gone the academic degree. So we like to bring in the different personalities. And for you, Rachel, is like, it's that more kinesthetist, like kinetic type of learning. And it's been hard for me to try and give an example of that until now. It's like, you've got a whole business and a super in-depth, layered understanding of the human body, all through hands-on learning. I think it's such a great case study or example for people to take away.
Yeah, and I think that's where I feel that our sector, and I would include, your rugby into that, sort of the movement sector, if you like, sports, physical activity, health, wellness. I feel that there are a lot of professionals, practitioners who are in this sector who are not academic, because it's a sector where you can become a sports coach or a personal trainer without having to go to university, because we are very kinesthetic in the style we learn. So if we can find a way to learn something and gain a profession, then that just demonstrates we have a creative intelligence. And it was interesting. I had a learner on a London course. He was a boxer, and he said, I can't meditate. I said, tell me a time when you're in the zone. He said, when I'm on the boxing bag. I said, okay, what are you thinking about? He says, nothing. I'm just, powering away and my mind's clear. I said, okay, so boxing on the bag is your meditation. He said, I never thought of it like that. And I said, it's finding, like you said, Don, those moments where you gain. I think it was Sir Ken Robinson, who passed away in 2021, sadly. I would love to have met him, who really wanted to disrupt the education sector, talking about creative intelligence. He wrote a book called The Element, and he talks about everybody has those moments, those times, those places or activities that put them in the zone. And that element zone is when time means nothing. You would do it for free. You'd do it forever. It's just your happy place. If you can make a career out of it, amazing. I have. If not, it could be a hobby like boxing or rugby. But he really put it nicely in his book, The Element. And then he wrote one called Finding Your Element, which is a nice one for anybody who wants to look at that for tasks to find out what your element is. Interesting.
I think that's so important, because we'll often see a book that explains a theory, but they won't give how do we do the task to find that out? Because even in my, say, corporate, in Samson Armand, it's all about understanding your personality and finding yourself. But I was just like, I need to have a learning styles thing in there, because I could probably guess what people's learning styles are by the traits that we bring out in your personality. But what's the task that you can learn? Because I've watched other people give presentations on learning styles, and they go, some people are hands-on, some people are auditory, some people are visual, and then that's it. And I'm like, but that doesn't help anyone. How are we finding out how are we at 12 years old finding out what Rachel found out at 18 or 20? And how are we then applying that to we got 4 kids.
Yeah.
And how are we making sure that they don't wait until they're 25 and they think that they are not academic to realize that they are a hands-on learner? And that takes a bit more than like, what's the word I'm looking for, like fail and retry. And as parents, we want to be able to guide them to that sooner. The same way that you, Rachel, I imagine, will have the ability to have a room full of 12 budding physios, and you will soon figure out who is your academic learner and who is your hands-on learner. So I imagine when I was there was a university student. I can't remember what his name was. And then you had Dunks, and Dunks was definitely your hands-on learner. He has the backwards cap. He was like, I'll go and try this. And he was like, but he learned then, he was passionate about it. But you put him into university, he would have been like writing his notes, but like probably in the inside going like, I'm not taking this on. So do you find that you have that ability to notice the difference between the two?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a skill I developed from many, many years in a classroom, 20 years being in a classroom, teaching and getting it wrong a lot. And I think where you have these different dynamics, these different characters, instead of when maybe I felt frustrated by a certain dynamic, I would stand back and go, okay, how do I help this character develop within the classroom without this kind of butting up? And an example might be somebody who comes across as knowing quite a lot, and others might call them arrogant. And I always think, well, with that kind of character, let's let them feel knowledgeable and important. So you develop that relationship of, let's say, stroking the ego, and I mean that respectfully, and all of a sudden the dynamic completely changes. Rather than trying to correct them and stop them and, jar them, let them be dominant in some way, but facilitate that sort of area. So there have been challenges, but I think it's understanding, and I obviously got a teaching qualification over the years as well, and then practicing it and trying that out. And I think one of the skills that really Martin Haynes again helped me with was to never answer questions. And he used to do it, and it drove me nuts. When I'd ask him a question, he'd say, well, what do you think? And I'd say, well, what do you mean? And he'd say, well, what do you think? And I was like, oh, just tell me the answer. He'd say, well, tell me what you think. Why are you asking the question? And he would just continue asking me questions until I actually worked it out. And so I think that's what I enjoy taking into the classroom, is the skill of asking the right question. If you ask a great question, you will get a great answer. If you ask a poor question, you will get a poor answer.
And that translates to business too. Like the best thing you can tell if you like a manager or business owner managing a team is if your staff or your team members keep coming to you with questions and you keep answering them, they're going to keep coming to you with questions because you're giving them the answers. But if you say, okay, fine, bring me questions, but when you, slightly different to you, but I always say, like, if you bring a question, come to me with what you think the answer is, and then we can discuss your answer and we can, like, guide you from there, because then at least they're applying their mind and thinking, and they often realize, and in that process, they don't even need to ask the question in the first place, or the question they ask completely changes.
Exactly. I think it was Katie Bowman.
So I think it definitely translates.
Yeah, Canadian biomechanist, Katie Bowman. She wrote a book called Move Your DNA, and she talks about finding a way to make the question go away. So rather than answering the question, you question yourself, you talk around it, you think around it, and maybe the question just disappears rather than gets answered. And I find that quite a lot, particularly in the subject of human anatomy in particular.
And do you find that it's, because obviously you've been in quite a long time in the teaching space, and that's essentially what your business is doing, are you finding it's getting worse or better that the students that come into your class, when you ask a question, they just don't say anything, and you're like, I'll sit here and wait, and they struggle, and then eventually you really have to bring it out?
How do you know that pattern is showing up? What pattern pattern are you noticing?
By them asking a question and waiting for it to be answered, and then not, like, when you say, well, what do you guys think? They just sit there and like, okay, I'll give you 30 seconds, and then no one says anything, and you're like, are we so used to just being given the knowledge that we don't connect the dots ourselves?
I think, and again, I might not directly answer your question here, but I think a sort of a response to the question is, I think it was last year, I was invited over to West Notts College to run some workshops for the students there. And they invited me to talk to some sports therapy students. Fantastic. That was great. They were 18. I felt fine with that. But they also asked me to talk to 46 16-year-old football boy students.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So in my head, I thought, right, I've got to engage these guys. They're 16. They're going to come in. They're not going to be interested in a middle-aged woman with her PowerPoint there. So I always initiate with a lot of questions. Who are you? What are you here for? to know who I'm speaking to then know how to engage. And then from that, I can use techniques and tactics to then, it's called differentiation, where you use names and then make sure you ask a question for that individual that you know they can answer, so they're not afraid in front of their peers. So I went in with these kids and they were fantastic. They came in with their bags. We were in a big sports hall. And I asked them all to stand up. I said, okay, I did a bit of research. I've got a football fan husband at home. I said, if you're a Liverpool fan, sit down. So a few sat down. If you're a Nottingham Forest fan, sit down. And I went through some of the key clubs and there was this banter and boo and, said, okay, great. So now you're all down there. How would you feel if what I showed you enabled you to stand out in front of all the Premiership football physios and get chosen for your team? Yeah, I'd love that. So then from that, I was able to take advantage of their mindset, clueless about football, but engaging them into this idea of what's possible with the skills I was going to show them, the value add of using these. I had an hour and a half with them. I showed them a pelvis, spine, shoulder test that I'd done on Udon, talking about their teams. I got to know their teams quite a bit as I went round them. And they were there was a banter between them. So it became a fun ride into this 16-year-old football boy's brain, if you like, so that then there was no trouble getting them to answer questions. And I think that was probably my biggest challenge in teaching, was that demographic, just so far removed from who I would expect to teach.
I think personally, I think that's fantastic. I don't know if you've ever read any of Einstein's stuff, but he used to lean a lot into imagination for learning. And that, from what you've just done there, and if you're listening to this, can think about Rachel's taken knowledge, which if she had stood up in front of everyone and said, this is the pelvic tilt spot and the shoulder touch thing, and this is going to help you in your football teams, they are just absorbing knowledge and not connecting it. But you went into their world and you were like, all right, if you wanted to be the best physio in these teams and that's your way in, they are now, their brain is like, this is the answer we're looking for. And this is the imagination and this is where we're going. And then it's connecting the dots. I think it's such a great lesson for, you may know everything, but what's the story you're putting in someone else's mind so that they can create their own? And then you're giving them the dots to connect. I think I can certainly take a lesson from that. So we're 43 minutes in about, and there's a particular question I like to ask is, what motivates you to keep pushing you through the difficult times when other people might give up?
Family, loved ones. And I think coming back to my parents, I guess, were a big influence on me. And my dad is 88, he's got dementia, bless him. My mum's 82, so she's caring for him. They're just down the road from me. And he, knowingly or not, taught me about purpose. And what's interesting is we've had a slight role reversal in that recently because of his dementia. He doesn't want to get up. And so I'm going around to him and talking about his purpose, because he's lost purpose. He doesn't have a job anymore. He can't drive. Why would he get up? There's nothing to do. He's fully retired. So I'm almost reverse engineering what he taught me about purpose and drive. And it's shown me again what is the point? Why we're here? What drives us? And it is that, what's the reason to get up every day? And it's to make memories with loved ones and have a life that is fulfilling, which is not about material things. I learned that when I lost everything. And to really hold value of what we do and how that can be more geared towards other people. So I think there's more joy in considering how you can help other people be fulfilled, other people's happiness, and that just intrinsically comes back to you. So I'm not sure if I've actually answered your question. I got on a little bit of a roll then. No, but
I was well with you there.
Yeah.
Because we often, you can describe it however you want, but that it is the purpose is what gets you up in the morning. And if it gets you up in the morning, it's going to naturally drive you through some hard times when others don't. And that's like, I always lean into what does drive you. And if you can find that out, the sooner you can find that out, and like we talk about your essence and your gift, and like I wouldn't even have to do our personality profiling on you to know what your gift is, because it's so obvious. And it's when you're on the other side, it's so refreshing to see and connect with people that are truly living their gift. And you happen to be very similar to my best mates. And when you're around those people, it just eludes this energy and this comfort and this, it exudes, sorry, eludes. So thank you, Ray, I appreciate it.
I'm here.
And it's one of those where like we often hear people talk about find your purpose, and you go, oh, find your purpose, but you don't know what you don't know. And if you can listen to the people that are saying that and the energy and listen to their story, you realize that it comes from a place of experience, and it comes from a place of like, just go and have a coffee with Rachel, and you will, if you doubt, if you listen to this and you go, that stuff is a whole lot of nonsense, just here to make money, you're just like, go and have a coffee with Rachel, and you will see what that authenticity and that energy and there's like a spark in your eye will do to how you feel after you've had it. And I think the more you can find those people and hang out with them, it's going to rub off.
Yeah, I'd happily do what I do for free. I mean, I literally would. There is no separation between my work and my personal life. It's all, I don't work anymore. I just do what I love all the time. And I have these different roles that I play, but it pulls it back to this purpose. And it's the gifts that I've been given by the people who inspired me. I feel an obligation somehow, but it's with a passion to pass that on to others who maybe began as a very shy, painfully shy child, or feel non-academic, not very bright, to, show them, anything is possible.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, so here's an interesting question that we like to ask.
The last one,
yeah. What would you say scares you the most?
Everything.
It's a broad question.
Yeah, it is. What scares me? It'd be foolish to say nothing, but everything in some ways. But I find, and this is interesting when I think about sort of some of the things I've gone through recently, and go back to COVID, our parents, and all these things happening, and all these things that are fearful actually somehow inflame me to have a purpose and do more. So do I have a fear in things? I'm not happy flying very often, but I do that. Meditation, fearful, losing loved ones, but I think that's just pertinent at the moment with my parents aging, and I'm heavily involved in their care.
Yes.
So I guess that would be an obvious one to talk about. It wouldn't be right. I'm not fear of failure. I've failed quite a few times, and they've been the best lessons for me. So that isn't really scary for me. But probably, loss. I haven't experienced a lot of loss, and I'm concerned by that because of my aging parents. It's inevitable, isn't it? And yet we are very ill prepared for it.
Yeah, I think that's one that. So, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to share the last couple of months with someone that was battling their own journey, and the biggest message that he said, he was about like
his own lost journey.
His own lost journey. He knew it was cancer, so he knew it was coming to an end. And his biggest thing was, he says, he doesn't know why we're so scared of death. He said, it's a beautiful thing. Everyone doesn't want to. So what ended up happening is no one wanted to do. They weren't sure whether to reach out or not, because it's like, it's such a private thing. But he was like, isn't it sad that at the time where you want to connect with people the most, because you know that it's the most important thing, people are scared to touch base because they want to give you a privacy. It's like, you don't want to die alone. So essentially what we're doing is we're isolating that person because we don't want to disturb them. But realistically, they just want just a message.
They just want connection.
He was well known. So when I was interacting with people out and about, they were like, how is he? And I was like, ask him yourself. Like, I could tell you, but he would appreciate. And so like 4 or 5 people went in at coffees, and he would love it, because he'd go from it. It would be quite funny. He would be lying. So he was on morphine and all that kind of stuff. And he would be lying there in his house. And you could see when people walked in, this is what his wife and then would say, is like, when they walked in, he would just come alive. He's just like the phoenix from the ashes, because he was like, oh, there's people connecting. And his biggest lesson is that journey to death is beautiful, and we should talk about it. I used to talk. I know that his vision of when he was dying is he wanted to walk into the wild at his old house where he used to live, and then he used to look onto a mountain, and he had a picture of. He said, "That's where I'm going," and he almost was so comfortable with it that it was. When people ask me I'm sorry he passed away, I was like, don't be sorry. Like, I got to share beautiful last times with him, and it changed my viewpoint on how, especially in Western society, I think is like we approach death. And so, thanks for bringing that up, because it is something that no one ever speaks about, but we all deal with.
And we're all gonna, pretty much all of us, unless we pass, like, we're going to experience it at some point in our lives. And yet we don't do much to prepare for it.
Yeah.
It reminds me, there seems like to be a bit of the parallel, which is a very strange parallel, but my brain has drawn this parallel, is kind of like a lot of people go, like when I think about preparing for the birth of their children, like as the woman giving birth, people often don't prepare for it. You told, just crack on, do what the doctor said. But there's actually so much mental that side that you can prepare for it. Yes, it's a moment in time. Yes, it's quite different to losing someone in death. But I feel like there's these things that happen automatically in life. And you can maybe even, I haven't got the menopause, but you could put parallels to menopause. Like, there's things that are inevitable to happen. And if we think about like the Identity Human podcast and helping people to like have peak performance and like perform in all areas of life, we should be open to preparing ourselves for these things in life and talking
Everything
about them
and
and embracing not embracing because it's not a happy time, but I don't know, is there a better word than embracing?
It is embracing. You have to embrace the tough times, the sad times.
And I think birth and death are on a parallel. I think it's actually a really good comparison that you make, Ray, is to birth, because it is literally either end of life. And both, at one point, are a celebration. One of a new, baby coming into the world, and another one. And it's wonderful your friend found the ability to see his end of being on the earth, if you like, however you describe it, in this beautiful vision. And that's really what should be taught, isn't it? Because it's the people left behind that experience the pain once they've gone, rather than the person who's actually dying. Interesting.
Yeah. Great way. Thanks very much for being vulnerable there, Rachel. So what we always do is we also ask you got the last couple of minutes of this. People have listened all the way to the end. How do they follow you? How do they come find you? How do they, get in touch and just be part of your journey? So if you could, essentially do a shout out for yourself.
Yeah, anywhere you look for Biomechanics Education, we're on Instagram at biomechanics_education. I've also got a site, and that's more for practitioners looking for education. I've got a site now called www.imovefreely.com, where I deliver classes, so that those who maybe want to move more freely with less pain, they can join in there. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, around the usual places. So yeah, they'll find me. Rachel Frances Thomson.
Great, we'll put some links in.
I'm out
there. We'll put some links in the show notes for anyone who wants to connect up with you.
Yeah, cool. Rachel, thank you very much. It's been an absolute privilege having you on the show, and we look forward to following your journey and everything you do. So, everyone, thank you very much for listening. So, we're going to sign off. Remember, it's the same thing. I'll work on me for you if you work on you for me. Ubuntu, we are who we are for others. Right. Cheers.
Cheers.